Hi, everyone. Welcome to Indicio Identity Community Meetup for February. We are very excited today to have Mike Vesey from IdRamp. We're going to discuss about decentralized identity for online collaboration. There's a live demo, and as a remark, why don't we have Sam to have a little words here. Sam Curran, he is senior architect from Indicio Tech. Sam, please.
Thank you, Maya. I'm excited for today's presentation and Mike showing some stuff and the conversation that will ensue. The SSI community has been largely focused on credentials as a way of moving things around and various uses of those, and those are awesome. I am particularly excited about credentials as they apply to authentication. We all hate passwords, and this is a way to move forward and improve that scenario. It is a wide topic, and so we're unlikely to address every single aspect of it today. But after towards the end of the block, we'll have time for questions and comments and things, and we would love to hear from you about questions and things that we can talk about. There's a lot to do in this area. It's a privilege for us to have Mike present on this. IdRamp is in the business. They know what they're doing, and it's exciting to see working examples of how this actually applies and can work today, not just in the future. So really looking forward to this. And please, if you have thoughts or comments or questions, after Mike's presentation, we would love to have those conversations and see what we can all learn together.
Great, thank you, Sam. Now we're going to move over to a live demonstration by Mike Vesey. He's a president of IdRamp. Here you go, Mike.
You'll need to stop the share, Maya. So that
yeah. Okay, hold on.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay.
Hey, Mike, we can't hear you.
How about I take my microphone off mute?
That'll work.
Off to a great start. Yeah, lips removing, nothing's coming out. Thanks, Maya, for the introduction. And Sam, it's a great lead in. I'm going to give a quick intro, kind of who I am, my background, IdRamp message, and what we are all up to. And that'll lead into a demonstration of what we've done for a customer of ours in the wild. And we'll go through and see how they've used verifiable credentials to better protect and extend the capabilities of their platform. And we feel like this is a huge step forward for us as an industry to really see this deployment in the wild and how it's solving some of the challenges that they had. We'll probably extend on that, time permitting. We'll expand on that a little bit to see some other areas that we could improve this flow even better, and talk about not only access but maybe entitlement and some of the unique things that we can do around that with verifiable credentials and the IdRamp platform. So this presentation is really about verifiable credentials and the essence of how they can help with authentication and access control systems. It's not necessarily a pure pitch play of just IdRamp. We just happen to integrate and try to remove some friction from the delivery of credentials in these types of workflows. So excited to get to it. Quick background: I've been in identity and identity consulting for many years, we started realizing that organizations had these dramatic identity challenges when we were working on integrating some meeting service tools for Microsoft. We met with a lot of their larger customers and realized that the continual back-end federation of moving users around for service delivery was just not sustainable. And out of that really came this vision of why are we federating the users? Why don't we just create an environment where we can share these things and provide tools for the identity providers and services to use? And so IdRamp, born out of that vision, really provides a tool set for an organization or anyone really to organize different pieces of identity data and different services that they may want to extend. So for example, we can bring in an identity provider from organization A and an identity provider from organization B and allow those to live in the same context as we deliver a service like a Zoom or a WebEx or something like that. So if I'm with organization A, I log in with my identity. If I'm with organization B, I log in with my identity over there. We don't have to do the back-end federation for the benefit of the service delivery anymore. A couple of years ago, we started with the Verifiable Credentials, and Verifiable Credentials is, of course, the ultimate decentralization tool. It allows us to be very granular with how we interact with these services. It also provides a lot of advantages for the service provider. They don't have to store identity data if they don't want, if they don't choose not to, because they're getting the information they need from the assertion I make from my personal identity when I log into that service. It's much different than logging in with a Google or a LinkedIn or some other social platform for login, because we're not exposing all of that information. We're not going and sending the fact that we are logging into this particular service back to Google. So we provide a lot of privacy, and the ultimate benefit for the service provider is one of efficiency and control. So with that setup, I'll go through and actually show a demonstration, and the demonstration of the login process is underwhelming, and that's a great thing, right? We don't want our login process to be very elaborate. So I'll show you. Let me take the share here and share out my screen. I'm going to share my entire desktop here, and you'll see a couple of things. The first is you'll see the application, the QiqoChat application, which I'm going to provide a demonstration on. First, please confirm somebody we're seeing the right screen. We're seeing everything looking good.
Yep. See both the mobile app and QiqoChat.
Awesome. Good. Okay. I'm going to open my passport identity wallet. This is IdRamp's identity wallet. I've created a new one here that has cleaned out. Basically, the only thing in this wallet is a verified email. I get that by, as you would expect. It's just a basic two-factor. Sends me an email. I click on a link, it issues me a credential. So I have an email, I have a credential in my wallet here that has been verified. I also have a couple of, and you can see they're not in this credential, but I have a couple of vanity attributes here as well, first name and last name. So I can put in some information about me if I would like, and I put in my first name and last name in there. We'll see how that plays when we go ahead and do the sign-in process. So one thing I'll have you notice when we go to the QiqoChat sign-in process, they do support all the existing social identity sign-in processes. They also support sign-in, traditional create a username and password. So our message to QiqoChat was integrate a personal identity without trying to reinvent the wheel. So do everything you're doing today, but in the event that the user wants to bring their own identity, we can offer that as an option. So in this case, what you see here is they just added right into the list an option to integrate a personal identity. And we're going to see how this all works in a minute. When I select this personal identity, Kiko is basically going to prompt me for a QR code. Now on my mobile wallet, I'll open the camera and scan that. And it's going to ask me what information I would like to send. My email is required, as indicated by the bold attribute here. I can choose whether I want to send or omit any other attribute to this service. I'm okay with QiqoChat understanding that it's me or knowing my first name and last name. So I'm going to go ahead and send that. It sends the information, and QiqoChat will now log me in and associate me to my existing profile within their platform. If this were a new user, it would just onboard me seamlessly and do all these same things. In this case, I've already been in here before and added a headshot and things like that. So it's taken me right to my profile. New users would go to fill out the rest of your profile experience, but really easy to get onboarded. I didn't have to fill out any forms. I didn't have to go through a Google OAuth assertion process or anything like that. I just presented what I had in my wallet, directly to the Kiko platform. So a couple of questions that are probably bouncing around now. How does QiqoChat know how to do a verification on a verified email? What was involved in that process? What was the lift required there? So I'd like to bounce over and show you what that process looks like on the back end, because we've done some things in IdRamp that I think are fairly unique. So logging into the IdRamp platform, this is the QiqoChat client. So I've logged in now as the user, as the administrator of QiqoChat, and I've added my service to IdRamp. What's my service look like? It actually looks like an OAuth connection. So it's just an OAuth session that I have brought into to IdRamp. QiqoChat knows nothing about verified credentials, absolutely nothing. But you can see we just logged in using them. So I made a standard connection, which I know how to do. I do this with Google. I do this with all of my other integrations with IdRamp using OAuth. And then I've enabled it to use verifiable credentials. So in my digital credential section, I've created a proof for QiqoChat that is just taking an email schema. And you can see this is really basic by necessity. It's being very basic. That verified email can come from any ledger that has the verified email schema. Right now, it's taken Indicio, of course, Sovereign Mainnet. There's a verified email schema. And as long as the credential in the user's wallet has been issued by one of those verified email schemes, it'll let you in. There's no definition specific. It doesn't have to be issued through any particular provider or partner. So there's also a couple other things that I'll show you that are of interest, and I did this just really for effect. So Facebook and LinkedIn are also enabled in the IdRamp platform. And what that means is when we launch this service, if we went to launch this service natively from within IdRamp, it's going to ask us to log in or allow us to log in with any of those selected services. So it could be, for example, Facebook or the verifiable credential or another. I think I lost my connection here. Let me reset this and see if I can get it to go. Maybe we'll just wait on it. So another interesting thing is that, as you saw within QiqoChat, they didn't have a selection for those other two services that I just listed. So if I look at that QiqoChat login page, remember they had that integrated right on the main page as a personal identity. And that is coming from the service configuration here. If we look at this service configuration, I have the ability to add these embed codes. So for digital credentials, I don't have to have a NASCAR type page that displays all of the different ways I can log in. I can simply take this embed code and dump it right into my page, the QiqoChat login page, as they did. I think I might be able to get back to that if I log out and go back to that login page, or it might just take it out of my session, but we'll try it. I think I've lost, maybe my connection here is not good because I'm not able to get to that either. So anyway, that's probably a good place to stop and talk about questions, since I can't seem to get out. Maya, Sam, are you guys still there?
Yes, we totally are.
All right, perfect. So I just got some application issue, or some internet issues here, which is odd that it's not affecting my audio connection. But anyway, let's stop for a minute there and discuss, and I'll come back in and show the rest of the stuff if I get this connection back, and we'll go from there.
Questions? This is a good time if things happen fast and you're curious the mechanical parts of what happened. This is a good time to ask any of those questions.
Yeah, please. I'll try to think of some other questions that might be coming up. Probably the biggest is just that the fact that really we need to make we need to make special note that of what QiqoChat actually had to do to get this integrated. And the answer is really just understand OAuth, which they understood already. So very simple process, sign up, put in an OAuth configured service, and they can immediately make that available via verified credentials or verifiable credentials with simple configuration steps. They didn't have to open an API, do any kind of development at all. This was all done in a matter of a day with a simple configuration in OAuth and a little bit of guidance from our team about how to get that connection actually established. So it's a very good message for a provider, that is perhaps looking to extend their capabilities or augment their capabilities with verifiable credentials. This is a quick and easy way to do so.
Hey, this is Gordon, talking on CES. Hey, so when was the person logging on onboarded to the IdRamp side of it?
Sure. All they need to do to get onboarded was just that verified email. So in our identity wallet, and this is unique to IdRamp, when you load that application, download it from the App Store and load it, we ask you if you would like to create a verified email. Would you like to verify your email? And you put in the email address, it sends you an email to your box, and you click on it. And then you have that verified email. Because the reality is 99% of the cloud services on the internet only really need your email address. The fact that they capture a bunch of other stuff is just because they're capturing a bunch of other stuff, whether they need to or not. So we think it's a value. Now you can use any wallet you would like and give yourself a verified email credential, whatever means is possible, and it'll work the same way. That's the beauty of this, is you can use any wallet as long as you have verified your email and have a credential stating as such based on that schema. Then it'll work just fine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a great question. What else do we have? Anything else queued up? I'm trying to get back in to the IdRamp platform.
So it's Heather here. What is the roadmap that you see this particular implementation of verifiable credentials opening up? I guess, what is the starting point that this can offer a client?
Sure. The first thing it does is eliminate password management, eliminate account management within their platform. So as a service provider, I no longer have to store a bunch of metadata about who this user is. If you think about how this works, if I log in with Google, that is much different than if I log in with Facebook or if I log in with, one of these other vectors. So they have to store a bunch of information on the service provider side in order to align that information. If I request or require a verified email or a verified credential that maybe I issue, then I don't have to go through that process, right? It's going to be, I know what I'm going to get back. It's verified information. I'm going to get the same thing every time. So it's a big advantage, I would say, to streamlining the amount of data that they have to keep. Another thing that they can do, and this was just for authentication, so that's the first step. The other thing I would like to show is what is possible with the next step. So an application entitlement, for example, maybe I want a particular event or have a particular event that I want someone to join. And maybe I want a credential that protects that one event or that one session or meeting. That is possible as well by looking at the other side of IdRamp. And I'll see if I can maybe pull the share back up now and show you a little bit on that side as well. Just 1 second, find my Zoom window. Because that's a great question, and that's the natural next question after we get past just the initial, how did I get here? It's where do I want to go next? So so I recycled this and it appears to be happier now. For example, maybe we wanted to, as a service, maybe we wanted to issue an employee credential or something to that effect. I don't have it there. Here, let's look at the IdRamp employee credential. So for example, maybe instead of letting in a verified email, I only want to let my employees in. How do I do that? Well, we have, this is, I believe this is Azure Active Directory. I think tied, actually, this might be a Passport IDP. This is an identity provider that we've tied to the IdRamp account for an identity. So when I go here, if I log in with a traditional username and password, it's going to offer me a credential that I can then use to type the password in, right? I can then I can store this in my wallet, and I can easily go back into IdRamp. You're going to see it's going to present me a credential offer, store that in my wallet. It's going to tell me that the credential has been issued. Now back in IdRamp on that service, if you remember that I had, if I wanted to, I could easily go to Kiko's client here, and I could change the definition, which I won't do because we might break the service, but I could change the schema that it's looking for digital credentials and actually add the employee ID schema right to the list. And now it's going to take the credential that I just put in my wallet for my IdRamp employee and use that as a verification. So by enabling this and disabling the top proof, it would no longer accept verified email and would force an IdRamp employee credential. And you can see I'm doing all of this very quickly with zero coding and simple configurations with things that are very familiar to users. So this is the power of kind of what the IdRamp platform is doing in this context, if that makes sense. And if I really shoot the moon and see if this works now, because I was just having some issue, this is the point where I lost my connection previously. But you can see that even though this service is configured to allow login from any of these 3 different identity providers, it is only asking for, because of the embed codes that I was demonstrating, they were able to put that right on their website as a login method and not expose any of those other identities, because they chose to use those embed codes and put it, right on their site directly. So that's the point I was trying to make earlier. A great question. Thanks.
So in case it isn't obvious, I wanted to point out, Mike, that what IdRamp is providing as a service is folks that want to consume credentials and things like this, but don't want to go through all of the lift required to, manually add that to their site. And so what IdRamp offers is a service is knowing all of the credential stuff on the back end and allow for the configuration of that, while all the dependent service actually needs to understand is OAuth, and that's the link that I actually performed with IdRamp itself. So a bit of a translator service to ease the integration there.
That's correct. Yep. And we have tools, obviously, that can do API level integrations, and sometimes we need to get into those. But the vast majority of the time, when a customer, either an enterprise organization with complex identity challenges or a service provider that is really concerned about storing information or how they can make a better authentication access control mousetrap, they come into us with this need. You can't say, do you know how to use verifiable credentials? They don't. But if you say, can you speak OAuth, OpenID Connect, or SAML? They go, yeah, we got one of those. And they can plug one of those in very quickly to the IdRamp platform, and IdRamp will act as that translator, that bridge to verifiable credentials. If they come back 2 years later and say, man, we want to do everything with credentials, this is awesome, and it's so much easier for our users and all that stuff, they can absolutely retrofit their application to do those verifications directly, and they won't need IdRamp to provide that bridge anymore. So that is future proofing, right? It gives you options. I can implement this technology today, and no matter what decision I make or what vendor I want to use, or if I want to roll my own, they have the option to evolve to that without having to go through a lift and shift. And certainly in the enterprise, which is where we spend the majority of our time, the enterprise is in a constant cycle. They're continually implementing and tearing down identity systems. The challenge is they usually can't get them torn down, because once they start using them, they build dependencies on them. So now we have, these organizations that might be maintaining and managing 3 or 4 different identity systems, which is a nightmare. They have federation issues even within their own walls, let alone externally. So the idea behind this tool is to really ease those dependencies on traditional identity systems by allowing organizations to decentralize that approach and work more smartly with their partners or customers, or using credentials and decentralizing it and including a self-sovereign message for the end user directly. So that's kind of the takeaway.
So Mike, there's something you touched on really lightly that I'd love to dig into a little bit more. You were talking about the verified email credential that you're using, and you described the process by which when someone uses your wallet, you automatically guide them through the process of creating that. And I'm assuming that process looks very much like, I'm going to send you a link that you're going to click on to verify that you have control of this. Then you issue a credential that actually you records that. The utility of that credential is that other services, if they trust you, the issuer, don't actually have to do the whole send you a link loop and wait for the user to click on it. They can know immediately without waiting that is a valid email address.
Exactly.
And the reason I wanted to bring this up is that this is the second. So those of us that have been in the identity community for more than a little bit recognize cycles that the identity community goes through. And one of the things that I was really excited for back when OpenID was new was the fact that you could host your own ID provider on a personal domain or a blog or something like that. And the practical effect was that within a short amount of time, the only OpenID issuers that people would trust were a whitelisted set of companies. It was the Google, the Facebook, the Twitter type of a thing, or GitHub, depending on your circumstances. And we have an opportunity now. What we didn't have back then was really the governance that allowed verifiers to trust the identity provider in a more generic sense, which made it only make sense to really trust sort of the top level, very visible, well-known people. So the world of governance is new. There's a lot of talk and investigation going on, but we don't yet have very, very established things going on. We have an opportunity moving forward to establish and formalize governance frameworks around things such as a trusted email address, so that in addition to just trusting the one that you issue, you can subscribe or adopt a governance framework that allows for anyone who is using that governance framework and to be approved by whoever manages the framework to then be trusted as an issuer of that email address. So IdRamp is doing this. There could be other companies that abide the process and everything else to issue these credentials, and that would give anyone who's verifying these credentials the confidence that the email address was verified in a proper way, in a timely manner, et cetera, to give you the actual trust that we need. And so the other thing that I'm recognizing here about IdRamp is that as those things mature, those things can be added by IdRamp, and all of the customers that are using IdRamp immediately get the benefit of that taking place without actually having to change the mechanics of their own integration.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sam, and that's right. So I showed you, I kind of flew through that schema selection, if you will, or building that dynamic proof, but that's exactly the point. If we think of other areas where things might be coming at us here, healthcare, for example, there's all this talk of the mythical COVID vaccination credential and what's going to happen there. And the reality is we don't know what's going to happen there. But if we build a verification system here to say, I want to allow people back into my office or back into my venue, where do I start? Well, if you start here and you say, okay, this is a self-attested way, right? take my temperature. I'm not feeling sick. Okay, great. That's something. I've been tested. That's something else. I have a vaccination. That's something else. With this technology, we can simply come in and update that proof as these new things come on the market. So here's a new healthcare schema. Here's a new this one. And there's not only going to be one. I wish there were, but there's not. And so we have to have a dynamic way of asking for all of this information without forcing the user to know what they have and how to look that up. If I've got one that was issued by my healthcare provider, that's all I know, and that's all I'm going to know. Our job as a community is to build these tools and build these services so that I can make that dynamic. Oh, here's a new one. CDC approved this one. Great. I'm just going to go back in and add that schema, add that verification as an authorized way. To your point, once the governance comes out and says this is what's legit, here are the ones you can follow, I need an easy way to update that. And the solution that we just saw, logging into QiqoChat, was really, really simplistic, but that is the value, right? That is the value. It's completely simple. I'm going to have what I have in my wallet. The verification is going to ask me. I'm going to present it, and then it's up to the verifier to decide if it's good enough. So it really simplifies and truly future-proofs. I don't have to go in and lift a bunch of code and redesign a bunch of things as these new things come at us. All I have to do is add to the message I have, and the end user experience remains the same.
Right. The mechanism is identical or the same, which means that if you're asking slightly different questions or have different requirements, then the user is not confused as part of this process.
Right. That is correct. Yep. Yeah, great. Good points. Thank you for drawing that out. And we can, if there's any other things anybody would like to see, if you want to go through that wallet creation or email verification process, let me know. I can surely share that out and show anything else that that anyone would like to see.
So I do have a couple of advanced topics that I'd love to talk about, but first I want to make sure that that anyone who has a question or anything else has access to Mike.
Sure. Anything else, guys? Gals? Anything?
We have a quiet audience today.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, awesome. All right, Sam, let's jump into it. What do you got on your mind?
So so to be clear to everyone, this is not something that Mike and I have talked about before, but it's an important thing when it comes to adopting credential-based authentication in the broader world. I have to give credit where credit's due here. The original question asked of me on this vein was by George Fletcher. In the IW community, those are familiar there will recognize him. He's been a long time person in the community, and one of the issues that he brought up was that when we talk about logging in, there's a couple of different players involved. You certainly have the small players, right? The people who, well, I guess I'm standing here and talking, and I could turn a video on. So there you go. You can see me in my awesome facial expression. So. So small companies or small, online utilities are likely to not worry very much about, specifically about account recovery was his issue. And he said, so if let's leave aside pretend all the trust issues have been solved, the governance exists, everything's there. He said, the problem with larger companies is that the credential might be the mechanism of verifying the user, but if the user has a problem with that mechanism, they're going to need a way to recover that account with the actual user. Let me come up with an example here. Let's say I have an account with my power company, and I can log in, I can change my billing address, or I can see past statements, other things like that. So I use a credential to do that. But for some reason, my mechanism of doing so, the app isn't working right now, or I dropped my phone and I never reinstalled it on a new thing and I have no idea how to do so. I could lose the ability to actually log into the power company's portal that I use to pay my bill and review past information, et cetera. So the thing that he brought up was that this is, unless we solve the account recovery problem, then there's going to be limitations on how soon people are willing to actually adopt this. And I've been thinking about that ever since, and I don't yet have a very, very solid answer here. This is a medium problem. In the future that we all want to have happen, users will be experienced with.
Did we lose Sam?
Not there yet, and we have to go through this middle thing. Yeah, go ahead, Maya.
We just lost your audio for a minute there, Sam.
Oh, sorry. So we're in this weird middle ground now where where we have to get there, and we're going to go through an awkward period. And what that looks like to me is the NASCAR page. You brought that up, and that's a phrase we use in the identity community for people who haven't heard of it before. That's where you have the please log in, and it gives you the logos of like 10 different ways to log in, and it looks kind of like a NASCAR jacket, right? There's all the different logos that you can use there, and what I hope happens over time is that logging in with credentials is one of those NASCAR options, and that over time the other options kind of shrink and go away because the utility that they individually present is smaller, and people are going by default more and more to using decentralized identity and credentials to do these sorts of things, rather than relying upon other systems that have known privacy implications of that, right? The unfortunate part about using Google to provide this authentication is that now Google knows that I actually logged into all these other places, and that maybe not be something that I want Google to know. Because of the credential infrastructure that we've got, if I receive a credential from someone and then I present that to log in, they're not gonna, the original issuer doesn't get to find out that all the places I use that credential to log in, and that's by design for privacy reasons. So, yep. But account recovery, to pull back to my main topic, is an issue. If my power company adopts this, and then I lose my ability to use that credential to log in with them, they need a way to recover that account. The traditional ways are to collect an email address or a phone number. Part of this is mitigated, Mike, by presenting a verified email credential as part of what I'm actually logging in with, because then they can actually use the email address to send me a message and say, hey, here's how you do some account recovery, and that gives them a way to fall back to sort of known authentication mechanisms. Even if they just email me a link that lets me log in a single time, that allows me to sort of reset whatever I need to, or re-onboard with a new phone if I've lost the previous credential and all the information on it. So that's part of it. Another one is phone numbers, and sometimes the services that we integrate with actually already know these things, right? If I have phone service through the phone company, they already know my phone number, or my cell phone. If I've got a cell phone and I'm talking to my wireless carrier, then they already know my phone number, and so some of those things can be used. Right. In the absence, though, what that does mean is that I can't really yet truly remain anonymous as a user when I am connecting with them, because they need a way to recover those accounts. And so I think we're going to be, one of the thoughts that I have, and I'd love to hear someone that wants to argue a different point, because this would be wonderful. One of the things that I think we're gonna have in the weird middle ground for a long time is that I can use decentralized identity, but I'm going to have to present a verified communication method, like a phone number or an email address, in order for these companies to begin to trust the technology. Otherwise, they're going to struggle from an account recovery perspective, and that's a risk that a lot of these companies are not going to be willing to take, particularly in the short term.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think we hear that all the time too, right? Everybody's worried about the end game of account recovery and how do we get there, and what we've done, as I think is clear in our our kind of our vision of how this stuff is going to evolve. We have to provide options, right? We can't expect any organization to say, this is it, this is the way we're going, and we're going there without looking back. So everything that we're doing is that you can fall back, as you saw when I issued myself that employee ID credential. I logged in with a traditional username and password. That was still there for me to use. The migration, the evolution is going to come from the reduction in friction the user has to experience. So because it's easier for me to interact with your service by just, scanning a QR code or getting a message on my phone, I'm going to naturally want to use that instead of typing in a password. So we're eventually going to work ourselves out of that out of that dependency. I think for the foreseeable future, for quite some time actually, organizations are going to have to maintain their copy of who you are, so for that recovery purpose. But I hope that that transitions into more of a metadata management system based on a decentralized identity than here's your copy, here's the copy of your identity that we maintain. So that's the problem we have in the industry right now is I have at least 1,000 different places that have an authoritative identity for me, and they shouldn't. I should have one authoritative identity for me. All those ancillary services should have a collection of metadata that they store that tells them who I am to them, right? That's the value. So I'm tracking with you there. That is something we hear a lot. Everybody immediately jumps to, what if my phone, falls in the fountain? Well, what if your billfold falls in the fountain? What do you do? You go back and you go to the DMV and you get that credential, and you go to your employer and you get your badge, and you go to, and so rebuilding that today it's not great, but it's not any worse than an existing process we have today. And we're really creating some powerful identity privacy and usability benefits by transitioning into a decentralized and verifiable credential environment. So we're excited about it. We see a lot of service providers getting excited about it. We actually have service providers coming to us now saying, we want to get out of the identity business, right? That's a completely different message than 3, 4, 5 years ago. They don't want to hold all that information. Unless an organization has a business unit focused on generating revenue from the collection of that information, most organizations would love to just get rid of it. They're more compliant, they're telling a better story, and this technology is really the way to bridge that gap and get them into that type of message.
I've observed that the risk the risk of holding user information is just high, right? There's a cost there, and I think that when as the internet was new, people just sort of either were unaware of the risks or were willing to incur they thought the cost of doing so, and the more data breaches and the financial impact of those really come about, I think people are becoming more reluctant to really do that. One of the things that strike me is that one of the reasons, for example, that a relying party, to use the login identity term, is willing to trust some people like Facebook and Google is that they actually trust those parties' account recovery mechanisms.
Right.
And one of the opportunities that we have as a community is actually create account recovery as a service that would be engaged by the user. So the user, when they sign on with a mobile app, one of the things that they can do is engage with an account recovery service, and that could be provided by an IdRamp or another provider in the service. They would provide the necessary stuff to that service, probably their phone number and their email address, maybe even their mailing address, in order to how you would actually recover that account. And then if the user does end up in a situation, they could always get an account recovery token and actually hand it to the verifier, in this case, or the relying party. And that the relying party would say, okay, I know I don't have to know your personal information because I really don't want to, but I know I can use this token and I can go to the account recovery service that you engaged with, and they will do the work to actually re-engage you and re-onboard you, which means that I can remain in blissful ignorance about all of that personal identifiable information, and I can actually re-engage that. The cool opportunity there is that there's network effects of that. Not everyone's going to choose the same account recovery service, and that's okay. Some governance can allow that to be bundled together in a way that is trustable, meaning, hey, I know that this is an account recovery service that I trust because it's in one of the governance frameworks that I've decided to adopt or abide, and that could allow that to happen. Now, we don't have that yet as a community, but it's certainly an opportunity for someone to create account recovery as a service, and if they did, then wallet vendors could integrate those types of services and automate that process of providing that. And that could still, it gets us more decentralization in the process. It gets the relayed parties' wishes of not holding onto your personal information, yet they still have a trusted process by which they can actually go reestablish that. And that might be a way that we can pursue it as a community. So if someone's listening and you're looking for a business idea, maybe that's the one.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Great context. Other questions? Anyone else have comments to this discussion?
Now's your time. I'm out of things to pin Mike with, so.
No, I think it was great. It was good conversation, great conversation. We had a little technical glitch, which is every demo has to have a technical glitch. So seems like the service we were going to just stopped responding. So very odd. But hey, I'm really happy to be here, having some conversations. Looking forward to the great progress we're going to make together in the community. Welcome all those that are listening to reach out, get engaged, ask us questions. We love hearing from those, especially those that are maybe outside of this industry. I mean, Sam and I travel in a lot of the same circles, so we kind of know what we're thinking. We want to hear what you're thinking. We want to get that input from the rest of the community that might be looking at this from how can this help my business? How can this reduce my risk or whatever? So please reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to engage in some conversations and explain as much or as little as you have an appetite for.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was amazing demonstration, and thank you, Sam. And as Mike said, yeah, everyone welcome to reach out to us if you have any more questions later on. And you're welcome to join the next meetup coming up next month is March 24th, Wednesday. And it's about Aure's mobile agent and Grover ID. Grover ID is one of node operators, and they are going to give us demonstration. It will be a little bit different theme because Grover ID is the app combining all the messaging, wallet, and video chat together, and you will find something interesting. So with that, we are always welcome to hear your idea of the next topic for upcoming months, like April, May, June. So my email address, my indicio.tech. So please reach out to me. Anything else you want to say? Anyone? All right. Thank you again for coming for our meetup. And you have 7 minutes back. And have a wonderful day and see you next month. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sam. We'll see you.